Okay, so what we're going to do is I'd like to begin by doing a brief recap of where we're at, how we're coping in our recent foray into the world of Nedarim, specifically in the relationship, that dynamic between husband and wife, father and daughter, where her oath is to a certain degree hinged upon his reaction to it. But that reaction has got a very limited window of opportunity for him to respond. Within that window of opportunity, there's a dispute amongst the Tanoim as to how long, once a person has heard a neder that his wife has made, how long does he have to respond to it after him hearing it? And the machloket between the two opinions is, does he have a 24-hour period or a day? And that machloket is dependent on how to decipher the psukim, the written Torah. And this is a fantastic example of the delicate dance between the oral and the written Torah, where the written Torah, as is evident from an examination of the text, is not treated as a narrative, even though there may be narrative components. The written Torah is treated as a code that needs to be deciphered. And therefore, we scrupulously investigate each word, and then we try to create coherent structures within it. And over here, we've got these 17 verses which focus around what does it mean to have the power to annul the vows of a wife or a daughter. And those psukim also deal with a vow annulment in its own right. And within those psukim, there's divergent implications as to what the words actually mean. And then we have these two texts. We have the Tanna Kama, who remains anonymous, representing seemingly the majority opinion, but we'll see that's open for dispute. And then we have Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda, and Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Shimon that counter the Tanna Kama's opinion. The fundamental dispute is, how long do you have after hearing the vow that your wife has made to annul it? If you do nothing and you remain passive after hearing it, it's automatically established. You can speed up the process by saying, that vow you made, spot on, I'm fully behind it, and then it will be sealed immediately. Otherwise, how long do you have to react? So, going through the Mishnah says explicitly, Hafarat Nedarim kol hayom. It's the entirety of the day, and the implication is, what is the halachic day? Vahi erev, vahi boiker, yom echad. One evening and one night makes the entirety of the day. It begins in the night, it ends in the night. So therefore, if she makes the oath in the night, you've got a 24-hour period. If she makes the oath late afternoon, you've got perhaps only a few minutes to do it. Says the Mishnah, and there is within that matter to be lenient and stringent, and we said this leniency and stringency is about time extension, not about halachic severity. How does that pan out? Not B'leilei Shabbos. She made the oath on the night of Shabbos, on a Friday night. B'leilei Shabbos b'yom Shabbos ad she'techshach. So then you can annul it from the night of Shabbos, from that Friday night, and on the Saturday until it gets dark. We asked ourselves, Shabbos man d'char shmei. Why are we talking about Shabbos? We're discussing the laws of the time period allotted to annul a vow. It's got nothing to do with Shabbos. Why would the Mishnah choose an example of Shabbos? That is going to be a mystery that we'll hopefully solve today. Oh, maybe there's something not Shabbostic about annulling vows.
I knew there was something.
Good. Okay. So that's our first question. But upon him, you see that the duration is a halachic day. If she made the oath Saturday afternoon, then you can annul the vow before it gets dark. The conclusion, including word of the Mishnah, that last phrase of the Mishnah, that if it got dark and you didn't make the annulment, you're no longer able to, is superfluous. I'm sorry, it's superfluous. You told me the duration of time. Obviously, if that duration expires, then the oath is over, the opportunity is over. Why does it need to be stated? So there's two problems that we're hopefully going to reconcile today. Number one is why the mentioning of Shabbos, and number two, why the extra leg attached to the end of the Mishnah. The Gemara then enters into what we described as a 12-parted sugya. We used squatterizing to define and to number and label each and every one of the parts, and in doing so, we had a good opportunity to at least knock a kink in the armor of the ultimate enemy of the Talmudic student, who is Venus. Part one of the Mishnah, part one of the Gemara is Tanya. It's a brisa. It introduces us to the machloket that we hadn't seen in the Mishnah. And as we mentioned previously, brisas expand upon the Mishnah. They're outside and they add us information, but they're not crucial. There are two ways, as we mentioned yesterday, that because the Gemara is compiled in a way that it looks like an amorphous sea of words, there are keywords which give us direction. One of those keywords is Tanya, and after every single Tanya, we know what's coming next. It's going to be a brisa. There's two words, though, to introduce a brisa. Two phrases. One is Tanya. The other one is Tonu Rabbanon, the rabbi's taught. Either of those two phrases introduce a brisa. A Mishnah would be introduced with the word Tanan. Once you learn these words, you become enabled to fly through Shas, which is the joy that we'd like to give you. Tanya, we learned in the brisa, Hafarat Nedarim kol hayoim, the first opinion, who we call the Tanakama, which means the first teacher, the first author. Hafarat Nedarim kol hayoim, that's his opinion. Rabbi Yosi b'Rabbi Yehuda, another opinion argues. And there are two of them. There's Rabbi Yosi b'Rabbi Yehuda and there's Rabbi Elazar b'Rabbi Shimon, and they both say, Amru, they say, me'es le'es, from one time to another, which is a synonym for saying it's 24 hours. From this time to this time, which means from this time today till this time tomorrow. End of part one is a brisa introducing a machloket. Part two of the Gemara is a question. My time at the Tanakama asks the Gemara seeking information. What is the rationale behind the Tanakama? Why does he limit it to halachic day? In part three, the Gemara answers and it says, Amar Kra, because it says in the verse, we're going back to the Torah Shebiksav in this delicate dance between the oral and the written Torah. It says in the verse, Amakra, Beyoim Shamoi, on the day of his hearing. And since it uses the word Yom, we'll translate the word Yom in its classic sense, which means a halachic day. The Rabbanan, in part 4, the Gemara asks the reasoning of the Rabbanan, meaning Reb Elazar, Reb Shimon, Reb Yosi, Reb Yehuda. Where do they get it from? My time, Mayu. What is their reasoning, says the Gemara in part 4. We have a statement, a question, an answer, and this is a question which is going to be followed by an answer. Tif, because it's written, Miyoim El Yoim, from one day to the next. This is a resolution to the problem, and this is another verse in this 17-versed parsha of Nedarim, and seemingly it contradicts the first, as the Gemara is about to raise. So those are the first 5 parts of the Gemara. It's one statement, question, answer, clarity, numbering, and labeling as we go on. Now the Gemara goes into part 6, and in part 6 it says, now the Gemara has to rationalize if these two psukim are both written in the Torah, and they both seem to be providing contradictory times for the period of an annulment of a vow. How is it possible? Each of these opinions has to reconcile the Torah according to his view. So how is the opinion that says it's only halachic day going to challenge with the verse that says from day to day, which implies 24-hour period? Answers he in part 7, it's derech. No. I actually need it. Not only is it not a contradiction, it's an assistance to me and my understanding. It's derech. Why? Di b'yoim shamoy would it only have taught us b'yoim shamoy, the day of his hearing. Hava mina b'yamayin b'lelayla loy. I would have thought, when can you annul a vow? In the daytime only, while it's still light, but at night not. I could have made that error. To dispel that error, we include the words mi yom el yom to show no, it's a contiguous time. It goes from the day till the day, which would include the night, and therefore once you start with knowing that it's a halachic day, mi yom el yom complements it to say, don't think it's only the day, it actually includes the night as well. Ksiv miyoim el yoim, and that's why it's written miyoim el yoim, and that draws to a close part 8. Ulamand Omar, according to the opinion Miyoim El Yoim, who says it's a 24-hour period based on the verse Miyoim El Yoim. Ha, Ksiv B'Yoim Shamo. It says on the day of his hearing, which implies a halachic day, not a 24-hour period. He says not only is there not a problem, it actually is an assistant. And he answers in part 9, and he says, it's strict, it's needed. Why? If I would have written miyoim el yoim from one day to the next, I would have thought michad b'shaba lechad b'shaba, from the first of Shabbos, which means yom rishon b'Shabbos, from Sunday to Sunday. I would have thought from this day till this day next week. And since I would have thought from this day till this day next week, that would have extended the period of time to an entire week. Leifer law, you could annul it. Ksiv beyoim shamo, it says on the day of his hearing to limit it to a day. So now what comes out is this beautiful parallelism where you have these two opinions, both kind of straddling these two psukim, and depending on your starting point, you either learn one pasuk to tell me the stipulated time and the other pasuk to complement it, or the other way around. And that is the beginning of our understanding a question coming from Moshe. Okay, so excellent question. The Mishnah is only the only opinion that occurs in the Mishnah is the opinion of the Tanna Kama. Reb Lazar, Reb Shimon, and Reb Yisrael, who say that it's a 24-hour period, they don't appear in the Mishnah. They appear only in the Brisa. Okay, and in the appearance in the Brisa, you're right, they do say it's a 24-hour period. What the Gemara is doing now is it's discovering the source of where they got that conclusion from. Yes, exactly. Okay, so that draws to a close the first 9 parts of the Gemara, and if we go over them, it's clear, it's crystal clear, and it should be crystal clear to you, because once you've actually numbered and labeled the parts, it's like a file. Your brain is like a filing system, which means if you file in the information in an orderly fashion, you can always go and you can find it later on. If it's just one big balagan, or as they say, a bagalan, so then it won't be possible to retrieve, and you won't be able to build on anything which is real and relevant. So we have this statement. The statement is statement, question, what's the reasoning? Answer, this is the reasoning. What's the reasoning? Answer, this is the reasoning. Kasha, it's a problem with him. Resolution. Kasha, it's a problem with him. Resolution, and that's 9 parts. And now we go into the 10th, 11th, and 12th part. Amr Reb Shimon ben Pazi. Says Reb Shimon ben Pazi, Amr Reb Shua ben Levi, in the name of Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi, ein halachic isazug. Says Rabbi Shimon ben Pazi, in the name of Rabbi Shimon Levi, both Amoroim, and they say, we do not rule like that pair, meaning the opinions, Rabbi Lazar, Rabbi Shimon, and Rabbi Yisrael, who state that it's a 24-hour period, we do not follow them. We stick to what we saw in the Mishnah, which is a halachic day. Part 10. Part 11, Levi, a great Amora, Sava Lamervat Kahanitnoi, he had an intention to practice, to act like these Tanoim, meaning that he wanted to annul a vow because give a person a 24-hour period and not a halachic day. When Rav heard about this, who was his teacher, Amalei Rav, Hafi Omar Chavivi, and if Rav was his teacher, it's probably his colleague, but nevertheless, he says, this is what my Chavivi, my beloved, and we find out that this beloved is actually Rabbi Hia, who was Rav's uncle, who he called his beloved because he was so beloved to him. Amir Rav Hafi Omar Chavivi, Ein halacha ka'isazug. You do not paskin like that pair. So we have 2 Amoraim, both ruling that the halacha follows the Stam Mishnah, which is that Hafarat Nedarim is a halachic day and not a 24-hour period. And now in the last parts of the Gemara, so Reb Shimon Pazi and Rav, which are parts 10 and 11. In part 12, we have seemingly 2 random facts which have got zero relevance to the sugya. One is the following: Barav shadi gira ubodik. Barav shot arrows and checked, and The Ran says what this meant was when people came to him, not husband and wife, but a stem person came and he said, I made a neder. I want you to annul it. So there were two ways of annulling it. One of them was through regret, and the other one was finding a circumstance that was present at the time you made the oath, which had you known it, you never would have made the oath. For example, I make an oath that I'm not going to drink tea because I think I've got a massive supply of coffee. I go in and I look in my pantry and there's no coffee there. Had I known that, I never would have made an oath to forbid tea upon myself. That's called a pesach, a petach. That needs a little you have to discover that. That's not easy to find. The other way of annulling a vow is through what's called charot, regret. I said to myself, I'm not going to drink tea. I actually had no idea how hard it was going to be. And I said, I just regret I made that vow. I don't want to do it. And that doesn't require much study. You can do that off the cuff. So the reason why Chiur Barav was able to shoot arrows whilst annulling vows is because he held that it's enough for a person to regret to undo the vow, and therefore he didn't need to actually sit on it and put study. Rabbi Rav Huna, Yosef Ukaim. Similarly, Rabbi Rav Huna would get up and sit down. He also wouldn't give it serious, what's called kaved rosh, serious attention, because it was such a light thing that it didn't require serious study. And that's what those two things mean. But why that is a 12th part of our Gemara is a mystery. And it's a mystery that hopefully we will solve, but not quite yet. We need to nurture the question a little bit longer. But remember when we began, we said there's two problems that stick out in the Mishnah. One was the mentioning of Shabbos, and the other one was that arbitrary statement at the end of the Mishnah. As we go on to the next Amud of the Gemara, we will discover the answer to those two questions. Okay. Tznan Hasam. Tanan, as we saw when we began the previous Gemara, it said the word Tanya, and we said that's a keyword introducing a Baraisa. Tanan is a keyword introducing a Mishnah. Tanan, Hasam, the word Hasam, Hatam, means there. A general rule of deciphering Aramaic, because Hasam is an Aramaic word, is that there's certain letters which switch. That in Hebrew it's written as a single one letter, and in Aramaic the word may be the same word, but the letter is switched. One of those letters which is interchangeable is the letter Taf, which is the Aramaic equivalent of the letter Shin in Hebrew. So, for example, in Hebrew a ox is a shor. In Aramaic, an ox is a tor or a tura, which is similar to the Spanish toro, and that's where shor is etymologically rooted. Some nice etymological overlaps. Daled and Zayin interchange. So the way you say Zachar in Hebrew, in Aramaic would be Dafar. So when you see that, Tnan Hata means over there, which is Sham, there. Tnan Hasam, Meifirin. So now, where is Hatam? Where is that? So this is a Mishnah in Shabbos, in the very last chapter of Shabbos. And in the very last chapter of Shabbos, and now let's think about what we said. Remember, we noticed there was something peculiar about the Mishnah. There were two things which seemed a little bit, cause for consternation. One of them was the fact that the Mishnah mentioned Shabbos, which was seemingly an unnecessary mention if the entire purpose of the Mishnah was to stipulate the period of time allowed to annul the vow. And the second thing was that random sentence at the end of the Mishnah, which seemed to be superfluous because the information had already been taught, which was that if it got dark, and you didn't make the annulment, so you no longer are able to do so. Well, of course, you've told me what the time is. Why do you need to tell me that again? What's the point of reiteration? And this is based on our approach to Mishnahs. As we've seen so many times, a Mishnah is a tip of a halachic Torah iceberg, and it's deliberately got clues that are there to cause us to think, this is strange, to prompt us to think, to open up our minds to discuss, and in doing so, we are able to penetrate the depth of the Mishnah as we're about to see. Now, to me, this is not only, oh wow, that's so cool. When we learn Gemara, it's so cool. It's a generational necessity. Because the thrust of where our brains are going in 2026 is wisdom has been replaced by information. When we think about learning, we don't think about thinking. we think about input, receiving. We're dealing with more information on a daily basis today than in the history of time. The amount of access we have to any information within the click of a finger, within the scroll down of a text, is unimaginable. And as a result, our approach to learning has become, well, if I need some information, I'll just get it from from the source. And with the advent of AI, it's not only that I'll get the information, but I will tailor it to the nth degree to suit exactly what I'm searching for. Now, that has amazing advantages. It also has a very, very sad underbelly. And the underbelly is that the cognitive excellence, the power to discover, to explore, to delve into, has been radically dissipated and diluted. And therefore, when you look at a Mishnah is more than anything else an invitation to think, to ponder, to consider, to delve deeper. And the reason why that's so important is because even though the accessory information that we need in life we can get extremely quickly, but the fundamental bare bones of how we function as human beings is based on deep understanding and the penetration of the surface of what appears to be to what really is. And that's relationships, and that's the way the world works, and that's even in the intricacies of your chosen profession. If you're a doctor and your diagnostic skills are based purely on what you feed into a computer, you can completely misdiagnose, because there's a certain depth of intuitive delving into that allows the reality to become evident, which a artificial intelligence cannot reproduce. And I'd like to say this Shiur, which we are going to be offering opportunities to sponsor the Shiur Le'ilui Neshama of people. So this Shiur is Le'ilui Nishmas my father. My father was an amazing, amazing human being. He was also an incredible doctor. And once he came to Jerusalem, and he wanted to volunteer of his time. He was a gastroenterologist. So he went to a clinic and he said he'd volunteer his time to deal with very complex gastro cases. And a lady came to see him, and she had been suffering from reflux for years and years and years and years. And reflux generally is an excess of acid in the digestive system, in the whatever it is. He was a gastro, not me. So the prescription for an excess of acid is obviously an antacid. And most of Tums and the other antacids are exactly that. They dilute the acid, and then it relieves the reflux, the heartburn, or whatever it is. And this woman came to him. She's had reflux for years and years and years, and she'd gone to gastro after gastro, and they'd given her the same prescription, and not only didn't make her better, it actually aggravated her symptoms. So my father sat with her, and he talked to her, and he gave her 45 minutes of his time, speaking about her history, understanding her clinical background. And he thought to himself, and he said, you know what? 90 or maybe even more than 90% of cases of reflux are caused by excess acid in the system. But there's a small potential which is caused by excess alkaline. And it's clear that she was part of that second category. She had suffered for years and years and years, simply because no one thought. No one thought. You know, the great detective, Sherlock Holmes, even though it's fictional, the entire beauty of Sherlock Holmes' works is trying to put together the pieces that you can see to discover what's underneath it. You have these clues, and the clues can be very far apart, and you need to put in so much cognitive effort to discover what the meaning behind them is. And that's really what life is. If we want to relate to people, if we want to understand anything, if we want to understand the workings of Hashem in the world, we have to look for the clues. They're not going to just kind of show up in our face with a written AI instruction that tells us exactly what's going on and then has a request, you want even more clarity. It's not going to happen.
Please defer interpretation. I will extract the meaning, organize the arguments, and deliver a finalized understanding. No further thought.
So there's a great fear that I have. There's a great fear that I have that as the world moves more towards obsession with information, we're going to lose a lot of our humanity, and we're going to outsource our thinking process to artificial intelligence. And in doing so, it kind of is a living out of the nightmare where the robots are actually running our lives in a very subtle sense that we may not even notice. Tanan Hassam, we learned in a Mishnah at the end of Shabbos, Hafarat Nedarim b'Shabbos. You can annul vows on Shabbos. Now, Hafarat, we learned that the word lahafer is the verb that's used to describe the annulment of vows between man, wife, father, daughter. So a man can annul the vows of his wife b'Shabbos, on Shabbos, and a father can annul the vows of his wife. The father can annul the vows of his daughter b'Shabbos. V'nish'alin lenedarim, and you can ask about oaths, shehein letzorech Shabbos, which are for the need of Shabbos. The second part of this Mishnah says you can ask for oaths. Sheilep and nedarim means that it's unrelated to husband, wife, father, daughter. It's an average person, Joe in the street, or shall we say, Yosef in the street. And he makes an oath. And he realizes that he doesn't want this oath anymore. He has to go and ask a she'ela. He has to go ask a question. Is there anything I can do with this oath? And he'd approach a wise man, a chacham, and he'd say, Rebbe, tell me, I made an oath not to eat jellies on Shabbos. Or I made an oath not to eat jellies. I made an oath not to eat jellies. And it came to Shabbos, and I loved the challah. How I enjoyed the meat. The soup was delicious, and the chopped herring was unbelievable. You can see it's Ashkenazi. And he gets dessert, nice souffle, but then afterwards, as he's having his tea, there's a bowl of jellies on the table. And their colors are magnificent. The kind of food coloring used is tropical. And the jelly, which is an incredible, rare combination of toxic chemicals, are beautifully mixed. And he thinks to himself, oh my gosh, I just want a jelly. I can't do it. He runs out of his house, knocks on the door of his local rabbi. He says, Rebbe, I have a problem. The Rebbe says to him, hey, you have a problem. You're telling me about problems. He says, no, please. What? The jellies. I want to eat the jellies. Eat the jellies. It's not healthy. Eat the jellies, says the Rebbe. No, Rebbe, you don't understand. I made an oath never to eat jellies. What can I do? Tell me, says the Rebbe. Is it something you want to eat now? He says, it's ma'unig Shabbos. I want nothing more. Okay, says the Rebbe. So you're regretting it, aren't you? Like nothing else. If you hold that you can annul a vow through regret, he says, mutalach. Go back. The man dances home. He eats the jellies and feels sick the next day. So that's what it means. Nish'alim lenedarim. You can ask about oaths. Shehein letzorech Shabbos. That those oaths are needed for your needs on Shabbos. And this is the quote of the Mishnah. This is part 1 of our new sugya, and it is a statement. And the statement introduces us to 2 seemingly different vow annulment. One is husband, wife, and father, daughter. The other one is normal person to wise man. And it says, Meifiri Nedarim b'Shabbos, you can annul vows on Shabbos. V'nish alin Nedarim shehein l'tzorech Shabbos. And you can require, you can request, you can seek a heter, a permission to annul the vow when it's for the sake of Shabbos. If you suddenly regret it, doesn't do anything. You actually have to go to a chacham, and it's a crazy thing. Like just like the husband or the father is the mechanism whereby the vow gets dissipated for daughter or wife. The chacham, he is the mati. You need him to say mutulach, mutulach, mutulach. If you suddenly regret it of your own back, that doesn't help.
It needs to be above. I can't be like to my wife, hey, I really want to eat
No,
this cake. Like this.
you've got two options: either a rov or three normal people. If you go to three people and say, listen, if you found three people, they could also be mati or neder. In fact, if you think about it, if any of you are familiar with the custom on the eve of Erev Rosh Hashanah, you do Torah Nedarim. What do? You get three guys, and then you say to him, all the Nedarim that I made, I'm regretting them. And they say, mutalach, mutalach, mutalach. That's exactly it.
So you always have to have three people at your shops, tip.
Exactly. You never know. If you've made some Nedarim, make sure you always have three guests. Okay, so now, we've got two components to this Mishnah. The one is that in regard to Hafarat Nedarim, it just says, Meifir Nedarim b'Shabbos, it doesn't make any clauses. Whereas when it says Nishanim Nedarim, it says Shehein l'tzorech Shabbos, it adds that it has to fulfill the need of Shabbos. Now you could have two vows. One vow is you make a vow not to eat the jellies and you really want to eat them on Shabbos. Another vow is you make a vow not to say the word skibbity. And there's no relevance to Shabbos whatsoever. Because skibbity is a word that you use throughout the week, and it's not a big deal. So that's just a vow, but it's not the tzorech Shabbos. Tzorech Shabbos means that you need it now for Shabbos. Got it? Okay, part one of the Gemara statement. Oh my gosh, look at that. It's me boilu. A crucial, critical Talmudic key phrase. Whenever you see a boilu from now onwards, do you know what I'm going to do? Ben, what is a keyword? What is a keyword? I'm going to give you this key. On this key, I'm going to put a word. And then whenever you see that word again, or those two words, you'll be able to unlock what happened before in the Gemara and what happens afterwards. Are you ready for it? Remember, in the world of squatter, the Ramchal says that there are only seven movements the Gemara will ever make. A statement, a kasha, which is a difficulty, a question, which is a search for information, an answer, which provides information, a teretz, which is a resolution, a raya, which is a proof, and a stera, which is a contradiction. There are two kinds of questions the Gemara may ask. One question is like, my timer, what's the reason? It's a simple lack of information. We want to know more. There's another kind of question that the Gemara can present us with. A dilemma. Could be like this, it could be like that. Could be like this, could be like that. It's very much like one president once said he'd like to find a one-armed economist. Do you know why, Teddy? Well, the problem with economists is when you ask them for advice, they say, well, on the one hand, but on the other hand, so if you had a one-handed economist, you'd be able to be okay. But the truth is, in Judaism, we go more with thumbs than hands, as you know. So a dilemma is, on the one hand, it could be a zay, but on the other hand, it could be a zay. When do I know that a dilemma is about to be presented? Whenever the Gemara uses the words iboyalahu, and it uses that Aramaic verb with the bet ayin yud inside of it, it means we're about to see a dilemma, which is going to give us two possible ways of seeing things, and almost inevitably afterwards, we'll see the next crucial, critical Talmud key phrase which comes. So here's the key. Says Boilu, whenever you go through Shas and you see that word again, you know that there was a statement beforehand, and now we're inquiring about two possible understandings of what that statement could be. This key is yours.
Take
Take it, my son. Only virtue. Okay, so that's that's important. So whenever you see a keyword, you got to do something like that. You know, otherwise they just like get swept under the carpet. It's keyword, iboilu. No, you got to own it. Iboilu. Iboilu. And now when it says this form, iboilu mean it was asked of them, it was inquired of them. Who's the them? Them are the Talmidim. The Talmidim in the base medrash, the students in the study hall. When the Mishnah says that you can annul the vows of husband to wife, was that only letzoyach Shabbos for the need of Shabbos, or dilma, or perhaps afilu sheloi letzoyach, even not for the need of Shabbos? And now what the Gemara is doing is investigating the reading of the Mishnah. And you could read the Mishnah in one of two ways. Number one, you could read it like this. Meifiri nedarim b'Shabbos v'nishalim lenedarim. You can annul meifir nedarim, husband, wife, on Shabbos, and you can request about nedarim on Shabbos. You could seek a permission. When are those two halachas relevant? When almost is a dashe shehein l'tzorech Shabbos. When those two halachas are l'tzorech Shabbos, that's when you can do them. And if you read the Mishnah that way, both in regard to husband, wife, and regard to normal person, the only kind of neder you can handle on Shabbos is one which is relevant to Shabbos itself. But if it's
You read it that way. It's not written that way.
you can, I can say like this. You can annul vows on Shabbos, and you can ask for vows on Shabbos. Ask for vows on Shabbos as well as implied when they letter Shabbos, and that last phrase is going on both the previous statements.
I know, but is it there?
There, you'll see. It's definitely there. It can be read that way. Is it the easiest reading? It seems like a bit of an awkward reading. Is it a possible reading? For sure. The other way of reading it is like Moshe would be saying, which is a simple reading. Mefri nedarim b'Shabbos, which is categorical. You can null vows on Shabbos, husband, wife. Then nishalim nedarim b'shem l'tzorech Shabbos. And when it comes to nedarim, it's only l'tzorech Shabbos. And then there would be a differentiation between hafarat nedarim and hataras nedarim. You with me? Those are the iboilahu meifir nedarim b'Shabbos l'tzorech Shabbos. That's really the Gemara's question. Can you be meifir nedarim on Shabbos when they're the need for Shabbos, or dil ma'afin shelo tzorech? Now, no, it's too much. There's another. Let's go through that again. Okay, here we go. Ben, you're ready for this. I'm about to take out another key. It looks like the old key, but it's the same key, but it's not the same key. It's a brand new key. It looks like the same key, but it's a brand new key. Use your imagination. Here we go. Here's a new key. In fact, this time I'm not going to give you the key. I'm going to give the key to Sion. Sion, I'm going to give you a key. This is the key. Now we've got taf shin, which stands for Toshma. Come in here. What's its function? What job does it play? What do I know about what comes before and what's coming afterwards? This is what happens. Toshma will always follow a question or a doubt where there's a divided opinion. And now we want to prove like one side or another. Now Toshma will always follow. And Iboilu will always have a Toshma next. So you can almost predict. And the more you become aware of this, the more you'll become in tune of the rhythm of the Gemara until it will become second nature. And then you'll be able to get a higher level of speeded up clarity, which is what we're seeking to do to give us the wings to fly through Shas. So Toshma means come in here. It can also, when there's a machloket, it can also try to bring a proof like one side against another. So Toshma is not only an operator when it comes to Niboilu. Come and listen, but it's introducing a proof to one side. That's its function. It proves one side against another. Good? Okay, so that is our second key phrase in a very short period of time. It's like amazing day to day. Toshma, come in here. What's the proof going to say? Toshma, detani Rav Zuti debei Rav Papi. Taught Rav Zuti, the son of Rav Papi. So now, this is tricky because the word, as we've seen in our Gemara already, Tanya Tnan, always indicates a statement of the Tanoim. But I know that Rav Zuti is an Amora. So why is the word Tani associated with him? The reason why I know Rav Zuti is an Amora, first of all, Tanaim didn't have names like Zuti, because Zuti is an Aramaic name, it's not a Hebrew name, and therefore the Amoraim generally lived in Babylon. They had different kind of names to the Amoraim. The Tanaim all lived in Israel, but there's a much simpler way of knowing it. Whenever the sage has the appellation, the title of Rav, he must come from Babylon. If he has a title Rabbi or Rebbe, he must come from Israel. Because the title Rav means teacher, and the title Rabbi means rabbi. What's the difference? Rabbi means that you received smicha. Now, when we discuss today and we talk about smicha, it is completely unrelated to the true concept of smicha. The true concept of smicha came all the way from Moshe Rabbeinu. Moshe Rabbeinu gave smicha to the Zkanim, to Yoshua, and was transmitted generation after generation. You need to have Rov Chofmei Ador. There's various criteria in order to give true smicha. It hasn't been in existence for centuries. In the time of the base Yosef, Rabbi Yosef Karin Tzfat in the 1600s, they tried to reinstate it. It didn't work. That means no one's had smicha for thousands of years, or at least close to thousands of years. So what is the difference between smicha? Smicha also can only be in Israel. So that means any great Torah sage outside of Israel can never get smicha unless he comes to live in Israel or comes to Israel for the smicha. So whenever you see Rav, you know that he's not from Israel, because every Tana had smicha, and that's why all the Tanaim are called Rebbe. And every Amora that lived in Israel was also called Rebbe, because any great sage who lived in Israel would get smicha. But when you're in Babylon, you couldn't, so you're called Rav. So when I see Rav Zuti, I know he's from Babylon, and I know he's an Amora, and therefore the word Tani doesn't make any sense, because he can't be teaching because he's an Amora. What it means is Rav Zuti taught a brisa that he heard from someone else. This is not his statement. This is a statement that he's teaching over. So whenever you have an Amora with the word Tani, it means he's teaching over a brisa. Okay? The Tani, Rav Zuti, Devei, Rav Papi. So Rav Zuti taught us from the school of Rav Papi. Ein meifir nedarim elo l'tzorech Shabbos. Well, that's pretty categorical. We sought to bring a proof, and we did. Part 3 of the Gemara is a proof. We had a statement, a question, which is a dilemma, and now we have a proof. The statement was introduced by the word t'nain, keyword. The question, dilemma, was introduced with the word ibolu, keyword. The proof was introduced with the words tashma, keyword. So we had 3 keywords, and I think about this, Binyamin. Just by knowing those keywords, if you understand nothing in between, you know exactly what's happening in the Gemara. T'nain, you knew there was a Mishnah, then you knew there was a dilemma, and then you knew there was a proof. So when you have that, you can create a skeletal structure of the Gemara without even knowing the pieces in between, and then you can fill in the gaps, which is a much easier thing for your brain to do than just to start with nothing. Whoa. Okay? Tashma, the Tanya of Zuti Devera Popi. Ein Mefrin Nedarim Elazar Shabbos. It's explicit in his brisa that Rav Zuti taught. It says you cannot annul vows husband to wife unless it is for the need of Shabbos. There we go. We had a doubt. The words in the Mishnah in Shabbos must be referring to both. Even though, as Moshe pointed out, it's a slightly awkward reading, must refer to both parts of that Mishnah, and therefore the only time a husband can annul a vow for a wife is when it's needed for Shabbos, which means when we go back to our Mishnah and it says Hafarat Nedarim B'leilei Shabbos, it can only be talking about specific Nedarim that are relevant to Shabbos, and it's not a general category of Nedarim. Ooh. Okay, so we should continue learning for the sake of those who've departed. The merit of our learning should be an ilun neshama for them. Okay, if they're uncomfortable with doing that, I think that's a bigger schus for them than silence, if that's okay. So continues for the ilun nishmas of the 6 million kadoshim that died al kiddush Hashem. We should be able to perpetuate their legacy so that we don't grant the Nazis a posthumous victory by allowing the Jewish people to disappear into the destruction of assimilation. Amar Rav Ashi, in part 4 of the Gemara, Amar Rav Ashi, Ha loitnan hachi. Says Rav Ashi, how can you, Rav Zuti, say that you have a brisa that says that the only vows that you need to annul are those which are for the sake of Shabbos? We didn't learn that way in the Mishnah. Ha loitnan hachi. Behold, we didn't learn that way. Nodra im chashecha, because we learned in our very own Mishnah that Nodra im chashecha, when she made the vow, which we said was on Saturday afternoon, close to the end of Shabbos, meifelo ad sheloi techshach. You can annul the vow before it gets dark. So let's think about this. That vow that she's annulling, that he's annulling, that vow, she made it minutes before darkness on Saturday afternoon. Whatever she needs is going to be irrelevant because within minutes it's going to be over with Shabbos. So if there's something that she needs specifically on Shabbos, it's not already called a need. Meaning as follows. Let's say if she makes a vow, he hears about the vow 5 minutes before Shkia. What's the vow? She says she's not allowed to drink wine. Because in 5 minutes' time, she'll be able to drink wine. Meaning he doesn't need to permit this vow for her on Shabbos. Because by the time he goes and do it, the 5 minutes could easily have elapsed. So from the fact that it says you can annul vows till the last minute, if 5 minutes is a generous amount, say 30 seconds, whatever it is, the fact that a vow can be annulled a minute before Shabbos finishes demonstrates that that can't be considered a vow which is for the sake of Shabbos. Are my words not sinking in? I'm explaining. Okay, I'm going to try explaining it one more to myself more than to you. Like this. Let's say the vow she made was, I'm not going to drink wine on Shabbos, and she loves drinking wine. Comes Friday night and she really wants wine. That's called the Serach Shabbos because she needs to drink the wine. Shabbos morning, she wants to have wine with her lunch. That's called the Serach Shabbos. 1 minute before Shabbos, that she can't even really have any time to glug down the wine, that's not called the Serach Shabbos anymore. And since our Mishnah is spoken about on Shabbos, and it says that you can annul a vow seconds before Shabbos goes, demonstrates that this annulment of a vow must be referring to a vow that's not L'Tzorech Shabbos. Because any vow a second before Shabbos ends is not L'Tzorech Shabbos, is not needed for Shabbos. That would be a direct machloket from Rav Zuti. Rav Zuti, how can you say that you can only annul vows which are L'Tzorech Shabbos? Our Mishnah disproves you. And that's what the Gemara says in part 4. Amar Rav Ashi says, Rav Ashi, ha lo t'nanochi. Behold, we didn't learn this way in the Mishnah. The Mishnah teaches us otherwise, because the Mishnah says, Nodra im chashecha, when you made the oath as it was getting dark, and literally as it was getting dark. So it means really at the end of Shabbos, you've got until it gets dark to make the dafar. So you're allowed to annul a vow that's not on Shabbos. So now
she's making the vow. He hears the vow that has nothing to do with Shabbos, just a general one. And when Shabbos comes, it would anyways be annulled because of what.
No, like this. She makes a vow which is relevant to Shabbos, yes?
It's relevant.
It's only relevant when there's some Shabbos left to do it on. Let's say my vow is I'm not going to eat liver. That's relevant on Friday night. That's relevant for lunch. That's even relevant at Shabbos. But 1 minute before Shabbos is about to go, it's no longer for the need of Shabbos. Right. At the end, right? So that's not called a vow, which is a Torah Shabbos, because by me annulling that vow, it's not really going to change the Shabbos. If I would annul that vow, so by the time you'd actually get to eat, Shabbos would be over. So that's not called Torah Shabbos, and yet our Mishnah says you can annul that kind of vow. So we can extrapolate from our Mishnah that vows which are not for the need of Shabbos can be annulled.
Right.
Right? And the Gemara fleshes it out, continuing part 4, says the Gemara, V'i amrit. And if you would say, L'tzorech HaShabbos in, for the need of Shabbos, yes, you can annul vows. Sheloi l'tzorech HaShabbos loy. But if it's not for the need of Shabbos, no, you cannot annul vows. My irech hashecha. What would the reason be for, and now we get to the mystery of why we attached that last leg to the Mishnah. My irech hashka. Why would it say when it got dark? Therefore, you can't annul it. Even in the midst of the day, you couldn't have annulled it to Shul Tzorech. I want you to go and explain what this means. Remember, we were bothered by two things in the Mishnah. The first thing we were bothered about, why are you mentioning Shabbos? Who cares? We resolved that because it's coming to teach me that you're allowed to do this Hafarat on Shabbos. It's coming to teach me way more than just that. It's also coming to teach me that what kind of vow you can annul on Shabbos. And how is it teaching me? Because look, if you look at that last leg of the Mishnah, it says, Nadra im chashecha, she made the vow with darkness. Meifar, you can annul it ad sheloi techshach, until it gets dark. Then it says a strange phrase, which we didn't understand the necessity, she'im choshka v'loi hafer, ein yachal hafer. Because if it gets dark and he didn't annul it, he's unable to annul it. If it gets dark and he didn't annul it, he's unable to annul it. Why do you need to say that? You need to say that for the inference. What's stopping him from annulling the vow? Darkness! What's not stopping him from annulling the vow? The category of vow, Shabbos. The category of vow. What's the reason? In other words, regardless of what the vow is, he can't annul it because it got dark, not because it's not an appropriate vow. So the combination of locating the annulment of the vow a minute before Shabbos ends, and then adding on that extra phrase is to demonstrate to me that any vow can be annulled on Shabbos regardless of its content. It doesn't have to be L'tzorech Shabbos. And therefore, says Rav Ashi to Rav Zuti, you are wrong. Our Mishnah says not the way that your Brisa says. Beautiful. Statement, dilemma, proof, counterproof. 4 parts. Part 5 brings us further into the process. It says, you're right. You're right. T'nahi. You're right. It's a machloket tanoim. It's actually a machloket. There's one opinion says that a husband can annul vows that are for the sake of Shabbos only, and there's another opinion that says a husband can annul any single vow that he chooses, or any single vow that she chooses. Now, it's going to be a surprise as to who those two opinions are.
Who says it's about focus at the end?
This is the Gemara. This is part 5 of the Gemara telling you how do you resolve the fact that Rav Zuti says one thing and the Mishnah says something else. How do you resolve it? They're two separate opinions, and Rav Zuti was representing one, and the Mishnah represents the other. And who are those two separate opinions? Look at this. Tonight, it's machloket tanaim. What's a machloket tanaim? It's Hafarat Nedarim kol hayom. There is the Tanakama who says, and this is our brisa that we're just re-quoting from the beginning of our sugya. Hafarat Nedarim kol hayom. Hafarat Nedarim takes the entirety of the day. Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Lazar, Rabbi Shimon, Amru, they said, mi eis leis. It's a 24-hour period. So let's think about this. Is there a relationship between what type of vow you can annul and how much time you're given to annul it? And let's think about this. Let's say we go according to the opinion that you're allotted a 24-hour period to annul a vow. So one makes a vow on Shabbos. Let's say she makes a vow on Saturday morning. How long have you got until that vow, the window expires? Till the next Saturday, till the Sunday morning, right? So now, let's say you didn't annul it on Shabbos. Is there a problem? No, you can annul it Saturday night, you can Sunday morning, whatever you want. Let's say you hold like the other opinion, that you've only got an halachic day, and she made a vow on Shabbos morning. And the vow was not for the sake of Shabbos. And now you can't annul it. And then the sun sets. And you can't annul it now because the sun set. Dark. So if you hold that the annulment of vows is a 24-hour period, there's nothing compelling me to allow you the permission to annul vows on Shabbos, because if you don't annul it on Shabbos, you can annul it after Shabbos. Whereas if it's a halachic day, it's compelling that you can annul vows on Shabbos, because if you don't do it then, you can never do it. And therefore should be stuck with a vow that you wanted to annul, but your hand will be held behind your back. Brilliantly, the Gemara says these two opinions that we saw from Rav Zuti and from our Mishnah are actually the two opinions of Reb Lazar, Reb Shimon, and Reb Yosi and the Tanakama. And let's go through it. It says, Tanai, the machloket Nedarim, Hafarat Nedarim, Kol Hayoim, Reb Yosi, Reb Yehuda, Reb Lazar, Reb Shimon, Amru, Mei Eis Leis. Leman D'Omar, abbreviation, Leman D'Omar, to the one that says, Kol Hayoim, in the entirety of the halachic day, yes. Tfei, more, loy, no. Afilu sheloi letzorech haShabbos meifer. Even if it's not the need of a Shabbos, you can annul it, because otherwise you'll lose your opportunity. But leman d'amar me'eis le'eis, opinion who says it's 24 hours. Reb Lazar, Reb Shimon, Reb Yosi, Reb Yehuda. Letzorech haShabbos in, if it's for the need of Shabbos, yes. Sheloi letzorech haShabbos loy. If it's not for the need of Shabbos, no. Then you don't need to annul it. And there you see the surprising resolution to the original question is both sides are correct. It depends what you hold, and it's hinged on how long you have to annul that vow. Is it a halachic day or is it a 24-hour period? How crazy. Hey?